Hey everyone, this is week 5. We are first going to start off talking about getting ready for your proposal presentations. This is also the week where we go over chapter 11 and 12, which is CBPR and program evaluation. You've already taken CBPR, a whole course in it, so I'll leave that up to you to kind of review and refresh. But anyhow, let's get started with preparing for your proposal presentation. Okay, so sorry, week 5, your agenda. We're going to go through the presentation template. I'm going to talk with you about the midterm because it is due Sunday, although I'm going to add a 1-day extension. And then I'll also kind of give you a reminder on the writing lab. Actually, I just flipped 2 and 3, so I'll tell you after we do the presentation template, I'll tell you kind of what to do as far as the writing lab. And then you're going to we have additional slides on chapter 11 and 12. These are actually not on the midterm. The midterm is going to be weeks 1 through 4, but I'll repeat that later on. 11, again, is CBPR, so I'll just have you review and refresh that on your own. Okay, so the first thing is proposal presentations. Originally, I had them for week 6 and week 7 with the exam in week 8. But I think we need to just push it back a little bit so I can continue to meet with everyone, also give you more time to meet with your chair. So I basically pushed it back to week 7 and week 8. The caveat with week 8 is that I just want to make sure everyone has enough time to study for their exam, final exam. So I might make some adjustments there as well. To try to give you more time, but again, instead of week 6 and week 7, we're actually going to do our proposal presentations. Again, hopefully most of the class will be able to do official ones with your committee members, and again, that's going to be week 7 and week 8. I already created times that you can sign up for, but of course you want to make sure that both your chair and, well, myself, and if I'm your chair too, then that works for both, but you just want to make sure your whole committee is there. And those are the times that I'm available, so you want to ask your chair and your second committee member if they are available during one of those times. So again, just use the same link that we've been using for office hours, and you'll see that I have them marked week 7, week 8 for presentation proposal times. And they're still really quick, but again, I'll go over that in the next few slides. Okay, so here is your thesis capstone presentation guide. Of course, you want to add your own title. You don't want it to be called presentation guide. So add the title of your proposal, your name or the names of your group if you're doing a capstone, date, etc. Pretty much how I laid it out right here. And then I also want you just to indicate whether this is your official presentation and you have all of your committee members together, which I think that'll be obvious that you're doing your official one, or you're doing a practice run. So if you're not quite ready to do your official proposal, everyone in class has to do a presentation because it's a part of this course. So I'm always trying to figure out how to kind of double dip in everything. So you're doing your proposal presentation for this course. It can be the official one that your committee is at, or it can be a practice run. So again, everyone has to do a presentation, but just I'll pretty much know, but just kind of keep in mind to let me know again whether it's your official presentation or you're just doing a practice run, and then in which case you'll need to schedule another time that everyone can be there. So again, this is the first page, and this is just a template, to use as a guide. Of course, always adjust it towards your exact thesis and or capstone. Okay, so for your introduction, you want to start off with a few stats. You can assume your audience is knowledgeable in general public health areas. Keep bullets short. You don't want too many long paragraphs because you're going to do most of the talking and explaining. So I would say no more than 3 to 5 bullets max to start off with an introduction. If my topic, for example, was stress and pregnancy, I might give some statistics and some information related to that. I might say, here's what's known about how stress impacts pregnancy. Here's some statistics around XYZ, just a little bit more broad. And then the next slide will get a little bit more detailed. Okay, so after the first part, you kind of given a broad overview of your topic. Now you're going to start narrowing down a little bit. So what's missing? What is the gap in research? Or why is this important? So again, if my topic was stress and pregnancy, I might say something like, while we know a lot about stress and pregnancy, little is known about how stress impacts pregnancy among Latino women. I'm just kind of guessing. It could be true. I haven't looked at the literature. But again, now I'm kind of filling in the gap. So we know something about stress and pregnancy, but there hasn't been a lot of research done, among Latino women. So the big picture is, so now you want to think, what's the big picture and why is this important? This is important for maternal and child health and XYZ outcomes. So now you're kind of starting to set up your research questions or objectives. So again, the first part was, broader statistics, maybe around stress and pregnancy, looking at different risk factors. And then the second part of your introduction is, okay, how are we getting closer to rationalizing your research question and our objective? So less is known about XYZ, or more needs to be understood about this. And again, kind of thinking about the big picture. So if I went with that line of thinking, broad info on stress and pregnancy, a little bit more narrow, there's a gap. This should be a real logical transition into your research question or objectives, just like the first bullet says. So therefore, here are my research questions. My goal or my question is, what is the impact of stress and pregnancy among Latino women, etc. So that's just a quick example. But your research questions, you want to list them out. If they're objectives, you could break them out into my primary objective is and then I'm also interested in looking at number 2 and number 3. First, capstones, it might be a little different. You might have a larger goal, and then you'll kind of break down the objectives a little bit differently, especially if it's more methodological. So here's an example. There's actually a real example from one of our capstone groups prior. For example, the goal, you can say, the goal of this capstone is to align CSU campus with Healthy Campus 2020. So that's the goal. To accomplish this, our objectives are, 1, to conduct 5 key interviews of people who, and 2, to conduct 2 to 3 focus groups of participants who, etc., etc. So that's one way you can kind of break down capstone goals and objectives, or maybe you're writing research questions, but I would really just list them out very simply and then state your research question or objective. And again, it should have, there should be a really logical flow based on your introduction leading up to this part of your presentation. And then you're going to have a method slide. So who are your participants and how many are you expecting? How are you going to recruit if you are collecting data yourself? What is the study design? If you're doing secondary data analysis, then you present the study design of the original parent study of where you're getting the information from. So you can say, I'm doing secondary data analysis from a national survey, and they collected it this way, and this was their design. So you're at least explaining what is the design, even if you're doing secondary data analysis. And then how are you going to carry out the work? Is there materials that you need? Are you doing surveys, interviews? And again, that's kind of more so if you are collecting it yourself. And especially for thesis, what are your variables? What's your independent variable? What's your dependent variable? And then for qualitative, you might not have exactly an IV and a DV, but you really want to state what is it precisely that you're looking at in your qualitative in your qualitative methods. But again, especially for thesis or some other type of data analysis, you want to be really explicit. What is your independent variable? But also, if you can, if you already have access to a survey, if it's like a national one, write out the exact question and the exact variable that you're going to use. Some of you might just be at the point of just naming them. But again, the more information you know, and if you know exactly where your data is coming from and what variable is already available, the more the better. And of course, methods is kind of a lot, so you can include all this information, maybe split it up between 2 slides or so. The presentations are really short, so you don't want to spend more than 2 slides on any one section. You want to kind of present an overview and just make sure it's simple, quick, but logical and purposeful. So again, methods might be about 2 slides. Okay, so data analysis and a little bit of methods too, we're actually going to cover next week. So don't worry as I'm going over this if you're like, what? I don't know what to write. We are going to cover data analysis, a very simple version, next week. But if you still kind of remember from 504, your biostats class, go ahead and start thinking, especially for a thesis, and if you're using stats, what stats would you be using? For qualitative, how are you going to analyze the interviews or focus groups or whatever type of qualitative data you're working with? And you can look at other examples, but generally you're going to have a transcript, you're going to code for themes, or you're going to code, and then you're going to develop themes. So pretty as straightforward as I've talked about last week, and kind of like the example we had for our assignment. So how are you basically going to analyze the qualitative information? And then for quantitative, again, you want to be really clear what your variables are. And then based on your variables, what is the appropriate statistic to use? Even though you're not going to have any data, it's really important to start thinking how you're going to organize it. So you are actually going to create example table shells. And it's basically a table that's blank. So you've set up the organization, but you just don't have any information in there. Maybe you could show one for, participant demographics, and then 1 to 2 for your main analyses, or one large one if it's qualitative. But here are some examples. Okay, so for quantitative, this is actually one of my old tables from another study. So I was looking at obesity, physical activity, dietary intake, and if I was just starting out and I knew that I wanted to stratify by men and women, for example, and I knew what my variables were, this might be an example table shell. So feel free to use this as an example, but just really think through, what is your research question, and basically what are the variables that you need to answer that question, and what tables would you need to create. So again, try to make one for participant demographics, and then at least 1 to 2 like this that are kind of showing the type of data or analyses that you would need. And then for qualitative, again, we're kind of picking out themes. So you might not know the themes yet, but if you have a hint, you can put in examples. Like theme 1 could be barriers, theme 2 is solutions, and then put a little description, and then you can leave quote blank, but at least show a table of how you might organize some of the qualitative info. And again, feel free to, grab from this example and just maybe grab this table shell and plug some examples in, but at least it's showing that you know how you're going to organize your qualitative information. Okay, then you're going to have a timeline. It's optional, but I would definitely optional, but definitely include it. It's almost like voluntold. Of course, it's preferred. You don't need it, but we would definitely like to see a timeline. Give the major deadlines. It could just be 1 slide. What are the major deadlines and milestones for completing your thesis or capstone? And end with the defense date. So if you're graduating in spring, I think I talked about this in week 1 or 2. Look up the date that it is due to the library. And then backtrack 2 to 3 weeks and just say your proposed defense date is around April something, right? So just a few weeks before you actually have to turn it into the library for graduation. So just include a few time points. If you have to get IRB, include that as well. Like, first thing you'll do is get IRB approval. If you're collecting data, your next big milestone is to actually collect the data. And so just really think about what are the major steps that you need in order to accomplish your thesis or capstone. And just give us a brief timeline, again, ending with your potential week of defense. So then you have the implications. So bring it home. So you want to really ask, why is this important? Why is this important now? Maybe there's some time relevance. What is the big picture? What is the larger public health picture? And at the very end, you should really ask, why should anyone care? Like, what is this going to help? What's the big deal? Why should anyone care? And this is where you just kind of bring it all together. So if we're going with my example, I might say I'm interested in stress and pregnancy among Latino women because there are health disparity issues, especially around maternal and child health, and think of a good line. But you really just want to, what is the big picture? You can even talk about future implications. So if I'm able to answer my research questions, the next logical step might be to think about designing intervention programs or health promotion programs that can help tackle XYZ. So just make sure you're really bringing it home as to why this is important and what is the contribution of your thesis or a capstone. Okay, so the presentation format, it's really quick. I think it was just about maybe 10, 11 slides. 8 to 10 minute presentation. We're going to do this via Zoom, and it is timed. So you want to practice to make sure you have your timing down. And so that once we get everybody on Zoom, we're hoping that everyone starts on time. So again, as soon as everyone's present, you're just going to start like, hi everyone, my name is such and such, this is my proposal presentation, and then kind of just go from there. And then we're going to have about 5 minutes for questions from your committee members. And so we'll give you comments, quickly, and then maybe also written comments if we need you to make some other adjustments. But mostly we just want to see that your proposal is well thought out, you have a plan for tackling it, and that you're, set up well to begin your thesis or capstone. Okay, so if it's the official presentation, which I hope most everybody, if not everyone, will do, the next thing you want to do is get your thesis capstone form signed by your chair and committee member after your presentation. So once you're done, then you want to get your form signed. There's another part to this that I will add, and you'll see that your thesis capstone form actually includes a list of competencies. And so I would like you to work with your chair to first look at that form and decide, what public health foundational competencies am I learning through the process of my thesis and capstone. So there's a little bit more to your portfolio that I mentioned, I think a week or two ago, that you'll want to include. So not only is it your presentation, you're also identifying the competencies. And again, I will give you that form and you can look it over with your chair. So again, as a reminder, we are planning our proposal presentations for week 7 or week 8. However, your committee members may be busy. I know I'm probably on most people's committee, if not your chair, and those are my available times. But if I'm not on your committee or I'm not your chair, we're still, of course, going to still do your presentation because it's a part of class. But don't panic if no one is available or ready at that time. We're still going to use your presentation as practice. So that way I can give you feedback as well. So I think most everyone has their committee together, but just remember to, invite your committee member to a time or give them a set of times and ask them when they might be available. But don't panic. So if they're like, oh, I can't do it week 7 or week 8, and you'll see which dates those are, it's okay. Again, we're going to use it as practice. And then we'll just schedule another time where everybody could be there. Always be professional, and just remember you're representing all of us. So I just don't want, what I'm saying is I just don't want anyone to send a panicky email like, you have to be at my presentation. Don't worry about it. You can sign up for a time and I will be there, just myself, if it's not your official one, and then I could help kind of give you some feedback. But again, everyone's doing a presentation, whether it's your official one with your committee members or it's unofficial with me, and I'm kind of helping you and giving you feedback. If it's unofficial, again, you'll have to schedule a time where your committee members can sit in and evaluate your presentation. So again, that is the presentation proposal, and this is the basic format. Okay, so for this week, your writing lab is to work on your presentation. Use this template. Once you have a good amount in there, or at least a good draft, and you don't have to worry about the analysis so much, give it a shot. But again, we're going to go over it in week 6. But once you've put a lot in your, enough in your presentation where you have some really good questions or you want to just review it, schedule a time with me and your chair. So for some of you, I'm both, and I'll be able to meet with you like as the professor of this class to say, here's what you need to look at. But also my feedback is kind of in light of being your chair. If I'm not your chair, still meet with me. I just want to make sure you're on track and that you have a good set of questions before you actually meet with your other committee members. So that way I can kind of help guide your research question or objectives a little bit more, and we can talk about methods. And that way when you meet with your chair or other committee members, you kind of have the language and you kind of understand the direction you're going, and will be a lot easier for them to give you feedback. So either way, everyone should meet with me, but in addition, definitely meet with your chair to go over your presentation. What you don't want to do is schedule everyone to be there and nobody saw your presentation, and then it's just all over the place. So you want to have meetings with me and your chair, and that'll set you up best for your proposal presentation, again, in week 7 and 8. You can do it. I have confidence in everyone. I've pretty much talked with everyone about their projects. Everyone is well on their way and doing well, so I'm confident that everyone will likely be able to do an official presentation. All right, so that was the proposal information. Also, due this Sunday is your midterm. And sorry, I was just kind of thinking, for your proposal, we do have the next 2 weeks because we are in week 5. You're not presenting until week 7 or 8. So whether you meet with me this week or next week, just make sure to schedule a time. If I'm your chair, you might want to meet with me sooner. If I'm not your chair and if I'm not on your committee, then maybe you meet with me week 2, in the second week, so that you could this week try to meet with your chair. So again, right now we are in week 5, so use week 5 and week 6 to really work on your presentation and meet with me and meet with your chair. Okay, so that was just the point that I was thinking about. So with your midterm, it is due Sunday. I have a little asterisk there since I'm getting you this material, even though it's actually technically not on the midterm. I want to give you an extra day without penalty, so I will accept the midterm exam up until Monday night, which is September 30th. And that's because I'm kind of explaining and giving you tips on the midterm, so I'll give you that extra day just in case you need it. So again, typically it's due Sunday night, but you can have an extra night. It's 25 questions, 1 point each, and it's scenario based. Throughout the years, I've kind of worked out, I've always had scenario based for the final, and students really liked it, that they wanted that also for the midterm instead of multiple choice, and just kind of, getting probing knowledge. It really makes you think about real life scenarios. So I'll actually go through a couple of examples, but it's a way of trying to make it as practical as possible, not just testing your knowledge and whether you remember, and quite frankly, whether you can look it up quickly, but really putting that knowledge to practice. So again, the questions are scenario based, and I'll give you a few examples. The midterm covers week 1 through 4, and it covers these following chapters: 1 through 10, 13, 16, and 17. So again, 11 and 12, which I'm going to go over briefly right now after this, is not on the midterm. It covers weeks 1 through 4 and all of these chapters. So be sure to review the slides. And right here, the next point. So use your PowerPoint as a guide. All the chapters are fair game, and be sure to reread and study the chapters. So even when I have slides, sometimes I'm giving an overview, I might hide some slides. You're responsible for everything. All the slides that are posted, hidden or not, but definitely everything comes from those chapters. So just make sure that you read all of these chapters in preparation for the exam. And of course, online, pretty much open book. But you don't want to rely on it. You pretty much want to know the information because it is timed. So if possible, and you've made some friends, through being a part of groups, you could form a study group and write up your own scenarios together and kind of think about some of the material, make study sheets for quick reviews or reference guides so you know where to look up information. But again, I would open the midterm and come to it prepared, because again, it is timed and you don't want to spend time looking for the information. You do want the information, and again, it's not always just knowing the information, it's how do you apply it. So doing some of these practice scenarios is really going to help. So here's a little bit of some hints on what's going to be on the midterm. So you want to incorporate this into your studies and practice scenarios. There are several concepts related to ethics, especially around the Belmont Report, anonymous versus confidential, assent versus consent. Definitely review the different threats to internal validity, and not just review them and their definition. Again, this is where the scenario base comes into place. Think of examples that would relate to those types of threats to internal validity. And then we also went over evaluation designs and names. We talked about how to label things with X's and O's and what the evaluation names are for that. So kind of review those set of slides. And then also types of validity, face, construct validity, etc. And then also sampling methods. So here are a few bullet points that you should definitely be sure to focus on. But again, you're responsible for all the slides and chapters that I mentioned. Okay, here's some midterm example scenarios. Okay, here's scenario 1. I'll read it one time through, and then I'll read it again and kind of share with you what my thought process is as far as if I were a student reading the exam. Okay, so scenario 1 is, you have been asked to evaluate the impact of a new tobacco media campaign in San Diego that has already started. After the campaign ends, you and your team stand outside convenience stores and ask customers if they've heard of the campaign and if they bought cigarettes. Okay, seems like something that could actually be a real program. So let me read it again and kind of share with you what I would be thinking about if I were a student. You have been asked to evaluate the impact of a new tobacco media campaign in San Diego that has already started. Now that to me is a key word. So I've been asked to evaluate something that has already started, which means I wouldn't be able to collect data beforehand. So that's kind of already telling me, this is probably a post-test only type scenario. Again, because it's already started, so I can't go back in time and collect, pre-test data. And the next line, after the campaign ends, you and your team stand outside convenience stores and ask customers, So I'm thinking, okay, so now I'm trying to sample and get people into my study. I'm not doing anything random. I'm literally just standing outside of convenience stores, and from studying, ironically, I'm aware of convenience sampling. So I'm not asking, looking into clusters, I'm not randomizing people, I'm literally just whoever stops by, I'm going to ask them questions, and that's convenience sampling. So now I've just kind of reread it with some concepts in mind that I studied and kind of know about. Now I go and look at the questions. So what type of sampling strategy is used? Again, convenience stores, actually pretty convenient that the answer is convenience sampling. There's no clustering involved. I'm not looking for particular characteristics for a homogeneous sample. I'm not trying to stratify and say, well, I want 50% men and 50% women. I'm literally just standing and saying, okay, who's next? Who can I get to do this survey? So again, that's characteristic of convenience sampling, and that'd be the answer. So again, what is the study design? Now thinking about those words, it has already started. I'm already thinking this is a post-test only design. So now let's look at the answers, or their potential answers. One is quasi-experimental, post-test only, non-experimental time series, which has a lot of measurement, experimental pre-test, post-test, and non-experimental post-test only. So again, there's no time for a pre-test, so C is out. It is not a time series design where it doesn't say here that we're collecting data again and again. So again, kind of going with my initial hunch, it's post-test only. That really leaves me only A and D. Now I know that quasi-experimental is includes two groups, and it doesn't appear that this scenario mentions or has two groups of people. It's not two different stores, not two different states, one that got a campaign, one that didn't. It's just that I'm in San Diego and I'm polling people to see if they heard about the campaign. So the next option, D, is non-experimental, post-test only. So there's non-experimental means there's no other group, and it's post-test only, so that is my answer. So hopefully you can see how I kind of broke down some of the scenario to what I already knew about research methods, and then when I looked at the questions, I can kind of see how I can, get narrow down some of the responses and make decisions. So that's scenario 1. Okay, scenario 4. So, well, this is the second scenario for you, but I'm pulling different scenarios. I will say they're pretty close to what you might see in the midterm or the final. It's not easy to rewrite these, so I probably just changed a few aspects of the study. So these are actually good to study on because the questions are pretty much written very similarly. Okay, so this scenario, I'll read it once again through. A new program aims to increase phlebotomy skills among students accepted into a nursing school. The intervention is based on self-efficacy and outcome expectations. To choose a sample of students for evaluation, you use the incoming class attendance list and chose every 5th student for the study. You evaluate this one group of students. These students were asked on their first day of school and on their last day questions like, how confident are you in your ability to draw blood? And the responses were on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so even without looking at the questions, I'm going to read this again and try to think about what this program is about and what kind of design aspects might be in there. So new program aims to increase phlebotomy skills. The intervention, so now I'm thinking, okay, if I'm thinking about designs and those X's and O's, I've got an X in there because there is some type of an intervention, is based on self-efficacy and outcome expectations. I'm not going to ask about theories in the midterm, but if I were to think about theory, I'd be like, oh, self-efficacy, outcome expectations, that sounds a lot like social cognitive theory. But again, that's not a part of here. For me, the word intervention is already catching my eye, that there is some type of intervention going on. The next line, to choose a sample of students for evaluation, it's like, okay, now we're talking about sampling methods. you use the incoming class attendance list. So now I'm looking at a list and I'm choosing every 5th student for the study. So everyone has kind of an equal chance. It just depends on the list. There's no, it's not like convenience or anything like that. So just kind of from my studies, if I were a student, I think, that kind of sounds like systematic approach for sampling, but I'll circle back to that. You evaluate this one group of students. Now it's italicized, so Dr. Holub is probably trying to give me a big hint. So one group, that gives me a hint. And then the next line says, these students were asked on their first day of school. Okay, so there's kind of a pretest. And their last day, so kind of a post-test, questions like XYZ. Again, this midterm doesn't include any questions about analysis or types of variables, but that's the kind of question that you would see probably more so on the final, once I include questions about analysis. And the responses are on a scale, da, da, da. Okay, so now I kind of have a few hints about what might be asked. I know a little bit more about the sampling. So now let's look at the actual question. So the sampling method is fishbowl. Well, it didn't say we just, picked numbers out of a hat, similar to B. And, my first inkling was because it's every 5th student, that is the exact definition of systematic sampling. So my answer is C. There's no matrix involved. I'm not trying to get first years and second years, and men and women. So again, I'm pretty confident that the answer is C. So how would you draw the research design? Well, the biggest clue here is that we know there's one group. And then it also said that these students were asked on their first day and on their last day. So if this is an intervention, we have a pretest, which is denoted with a 0 or observation. We have an X and then another O for the next observation. So I'm already thinking it's OXO. But again, the biggest hint is that, again, there's only one group. So now I'm looking at the next question. It says, how would you draw the design? And I'm looking in I don't know why it says AAA, but the first 3 examples actually have 2 groups. So by process of elimination, the last example, O1X, O2, is the answer. But even if some of these, like let's say the second one only had XO, I would eliminate that because I know I took a pretest. I would eliminate the first one because, again, there's 2 groups. But this question was pretty easy because there's only one answer that actually had one group. But make sure that when you're reading scenarios, you are paying attention to whether it says something was collected before and after, or again and again, like a time series. And that's how you can start to think about how you would draw out the research design. And so I would practice. Again, don't memorize just to memorize, but really understand first day, last day, and there's an intervention. So pre-test, post-test. And it's non-experimental. And then the last question says, you find out that students did in fact improve their confidence in blood draws, but you're also suspicious that they merely gave a particular response to try and impress you. What type of validity issue is this? So it sounds like this question just asked, how confident are you? Thinking about different validity, is this selection? No, you don't. It was pretty random, so you don't have a selection issue. Was there some type of expectancy effect? Probably not. Hawthorne, was it because of attention? Social desirability. So kind of looking at some of the keywords. You're suspicious that they gave, certain answers to impress you. I would definitely go with social desirability as far as the type of validity issue. So again, here are 2 different types of scenarios. And this is how the midterm and the final exam are going to look. So you don't want to just, for example, sampling methods, know the sampling method and their definition. You want to think one more step beyond that. Okay, fishbowl sampling is kind of like picking something out of a hat, which actually that's a good example. In some way, you're putting names or numbers into a hat and you're picking them out. And so just kind of take that one step to think about how would this look like if you were applying it to an actual study. So hopefully these scenarios help, and I would encourage you to come up with your own scenarios as you study for the midterm and for the final eventually. Okay, so number 12 is program evaluation. I'm just going to go over a few slides. And again, this is not on the midterm. The midterm is only weeks 1 through 4. Program evaluation, the primary purpose is to provide information to decision makers. I actually would say the primary purpose is more so number 2. So you just want to know, does the program work or not? You planned something, you were hoping there was some type of outcome. Did that come true? Is it effective? Just like the second point. So it helps make judgments about effectiveness of a program and to prove it. So again, you're evaluating a program. To me, basically, you just want to know if it works. And then, of course, the second part is it's important to know if it works, to either continue the program, to give that information to stakeholders or decision makers, but really it's an evaluation. You want to know, did it work or not? There are lots of reasons to evaluate programs. Just to highlight a few, kind of the first bullet is what I said. You want to know whether it works. You want to find out if the material is fit for the people or the target audience that you intended. If it doesn't work, it might be a warning that there are some problems with the program. And again, you want to show the program's effectiveness with a particular population. And you also want to see if there are unexpected benefits. So there are a lot of reasons why you want to evaluate a program. At the end of the day, you want to know, did it work or not? And did it work or not for your intended audience? Program evaluation is not something that you think of at the very end. Okay, we did a program, we planned it, we executed it. Now let's figure out if it worked. You want to think about evaluation and even in how you design your programs from the very beginning. So just kind of like this first bullet, it should never be an afterthought. It should begin even before the program is implemented. You're going to integrate program evaluation through implementation and the operation of the program, and you're also going to include budget. So the main point is that it's not an afterthought or not something that you're thinking about at the end. As you're planning a program, you're planning a program because you want to measure certain things. So you're always thinking about it even before the program begins. And then, of course, you're always keeping in mind as well, who are the stakeholders and who are the people who have an interest in the program. And you want them to be a part of the evaluation planning as well. Now, if you were to put together a very simple logic model, and I believe you did, there was more of a lecture on logic models in PH 503, but your basic logic model includes inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and an impact. So if you were imagining a program that was looking to change tobacco-related policies, this might be an example logic model. If you're interested in logic models, one thing I would encourage you to do is think about a topic you're interested in, type in those keywords, and then type in logic model, and you'll see plenty of examples some are simple and some are very complicated. So here for inputs, you're thinking about what resources do I need? So you need staff, you need volunteers, you need computers, and again, this is maybe geared towards tobacco-related policies and the health implications that follow. So based on your resources, what activities are you able to do? And in this example, it's coalition meetings, it's meeting with legislators, and then what's the output? You have groups that are attending the coalition meetings, you're meeting with legislators and having conversations, and all of that leads to a policy being adopted, which was your short-term goal or the outcome that you were looking at. Long term, especially if it's tobacco-related policies, you might see a decrease in smoking, and even more long term, when you're thinking about the health impact, you might see a decrease in tobacco-related cancer. So again, you're looking at what are the resources or your inputs, what activities do the resources enable you to do? What are the outputs? In a research setting, it might be workshops, number of, delivering an intervention, being able to do health education, those are outputs. And then what are the short-term, long-term, and long-term impacts of that work? So what short-term behaviors or outcomes happen? What's a little bit more long-term, like decreasing some type of rate or decreasing risk? And then what is the overall impact? So again, this is a very, very brief model of a program logic model. And again, the reason that this is incorporated in the evaluation talk is that this helps you think about what it is that you need to evaluate. And another type of evaluation is economic evaluation. It helps answer questions around programs affordability, efficiency. To the second bullet, what are the costs of unmet needs? Sometimes you're comparing programs in one disease to another, or comparing programs in one area of services to other disease areas. So you're really just looking at the economic evaluation piece. Okay, so chapter 11 is actually CBPR, and we took a whole course on CBPR, so this is really just a refresher. So I'm gonna stop here and let you just review chapter 11. And then don't forget to do your writing lab, make an appointment with me and your chair. If I'm not your chair, maybe work on your presentation and meet with your chair first so you can get an idea of what their goals are for your thesis or capstone. And as always, just let me know if you have any other questions. See you online.